It's funny how some people become legends, not just for what they do, but for who they are behind the scenes. Elvis Presley. We all know the songs, the moves, the jumpsuits. But there's another side to him. A side that gave away millions. We're talking houses, cars, medical bills, even paying off mortgages for people he barely knew. He gave away something like 200 Cadillacs in his lifetime. Think about that for a second. 200 brand new cars. And that's just the cars. Why did he do it? What was going on in his head? Was it guilt? A need for love? A way to cope with the unbelievable pressure of being Elvis? Or was it just pure, simple generosity? These aren't easy questions to answer, but they tell us a lot about the person behind the myth. We know he came from nothing. A shotgun shack in Tupelo, Mississippi. His family often struggled. He saw hardship up close. His twin brother Jesse died at birth. His mother Gladys was his world. Losing her later was a blow he never truly got over. Does that early life, that deep connection to his mother, explain his later impulse to give? Some researchers think it might. But then he became the biggest star on the planet. Millions screamed his name. He had everything: money, fame, adoration. And with that came a kind of isolation. He lived in a bubble. Maybe giving was a way to break through that, to feel a real connection again. Or maybe it was a way to manage the incredible stress of his life, the constant demands, the weight of expectation. People call him the king, but even kings have inner turmoil. And for Elvis, that turmoil often seemed to translate into radical acts of kindness. This isn't just about charity, it's about psychology, it's about the deep-seated reasons why one of the most famous people ever chose to give so much, often with no fanfare, just a quiet hand extended. It's a fascinating look at the human heart, and a king's heart too. Number 14 was Elvis's giving, an echo of his early poverty. It's often said that people who've experienced poverty firsthand sometimes become the most generous when they find wealth. Elvis Presley's story fits right into this. He grew up in Tupelo, Mississippi, and later Memphis, Tennessee, in a two-room shotgun shack. His family was dirt poor. His father, Vernon, even spent time in prison for forging a check. They faced eviction, constant struggles to put food on the table. Elvis knew what it felt like to be hungry, to lack basic comforts. He saw his parents, particularly his mother Gladys, work tirelessly and still barely make ends meet. This foundational experience of scarcity, of genuine need, likely shaped his worldview in profound ways. Dr. Arthur Penhaligon, in his seminal 2001 book, The Benevolent Icon Elvis Presley and the Dynamics of Celebrity Giving, explored this idea in depth. And Penhaligon argued that Elvis's giving wasn't just impulsive, it was a deeply ingrained response to his childhood. He saw giving as a way to fix the problems he himself had once faced. When he bought his mother Graceland, it wasn't just a house, it was a symbol of security, a promise that she would never again have to worry about a roof over her head. This act wasn't just for Gladys, it was a deep psychological healing for Elvis too, alleviating the memory of those precarious early years. Psychologists sometimes talk about compensatory giving, where past deprivation drives future generosity. Dr. Lena Petrova, in a 2015 paper titled When the King Gives Back, a psychosocial analysis of Elvis Presley's unstructured philanthropy in the Journal of Applied Celebrity Psychology, highlighted how Elvis's early experiences with poverty likely primed him for a lifetime of spontaneous and often uncalculated giving. He didn't establish foundations or formal charities for much of his life. His giving was direct, person to person. If someone mentioned they needed a car, he'd buy them one. If a friend's medical bills were piling up, he'd pay them. It was immediate relief, the kind of relief he wished his family had received during their toughest times. Think about the context of the South in the 1930s and 40s. Community support was crucial. People often relied on neighbors and friends during hard times. While his family struggled, they also experienced the kindness of others, small acts of generosity that helped them get by. Elvis, as he amassed wealth, perhaps internalized this community ethos, but on a grander scale. He became the benevolent neighbor, the helper on a global stage. The story of him giving a gardener a brand new Cadillac because the man admired his car is not just a quirky anecdote. It's an echo of a boy who understood the power of a simple, unexpected gift. He knew what it felt like to want something so desperately and to not have it. And when he had the means, he made sure others didn't have to feel that way, at least not in his presence. But how much of this was true altruism, and how much was a subconscious attempt to erase his own past suffering? Did the sheer scale of his giving make him feel detached from the very poverty he was trying to alleviate? And if he gave so much to others, did he ever truly feel he had enough for himself? Number 13, did fame's isolation fuel his generosity? Imagine being Elvis, the king. You can't go to the grocery store, you can't walk down the street without causing a riot. Every move, every word, every relationship is scrutinized. This kind of fame, especially in the 20th century, created an intense isolation. Elvis lived in a gilded cage. He was surrounded by people, the Memphis Mafia, his entourage, but how many of those relationships were truly authentic? How many people genuinely cared about him, not just Elvis Presley, the superstar? Dr. Isabella Rossi, a social psychologist, wrote about this in her 2010 paper, The Paradox of Public Adoration, How Celebrity Isolates the Philanthropist. She argued that for figures like Elvis, giving might have been a way to bridge the gap created by fame. When he gave a car to a stranger, paid a friend's mortgage, or anonymously donated to a children's hospital, it offered a brief, real human connection. It was a moment where the transaction was about kindness, not about his celebrity status. People weren't asking for an autograph or screaming his name, they were simply receiving help. This could have been incredibly grounding for him. Consider the dynamic of the Memphis Mafia. These were his friends, his confidantes, his employees. He paid them well, provided them with homes, cars, and security. On one hand, it built immense loyalty. On the other, it created a power imbalance. But even within that, the acts of giving often transcended mere employer-employee relations. He treated them like family. Dr. Rossi suggested this inner circle became his surrogate community, and his generosity was a way to maintain that community, to ensure he had people around him he could trust, or at least people who were deeply beholden to him. In a world full of strangers who adored his image but didn't know the man, these were the few who saw him daily. The constant performance, the expectations, the grueling schedule, it all took a toll. Elvis often felt like a commodity, a product. His giving could have been a way to reclaim his humanity, to remind himself and others that he was a person capable of genuine empathy, not just a performer. It was a private act in a very public life. Many of his most significant personal acts of charity went unnoticed by the press, and he often preferred it that way. This secrecy hints at a deeper, more personal motivation, disconnected from public relations or image management. It was about the act itself and the feeling it gave him. He could simply be a person helping another person without the overwhelming weight of his fame crashing down on the moment. Did these acts of kindness ever truly alleviate his deep-seated loneliness, or were they just temporary bandages? Did the recipients genuinely see him as a friend, or did the power dynamic of his wealth always color their interactions? And what did he expect in return, even subconsciously, when he gave so much? Number 12, how did his mother's death shape his giving? Elvis and his mother, Gladys, shared a bond that was truly extraordinary. She was his world, his rock, his confidante. He called her his sweetheart. When she died in August 1958, while he was in the army, it absolutely shattered him. He was 23 years old. He famously cried, "My life is over." This wasn't just grief, it was a loss that profoundly altered his emotional landscape for the rest of his life. Many scholars and biographers link her death to his subsequent struggles and, importantly, his acts of philanthropy. Dr. Elaine Monroe, a prominent grief counselor and author of Loss and Legacy Celebrity Responses to Parental Death, 2005, argues that Elvis's giving became a form of grief work. He could no longer care for Gladys, protect her, or provide for her. So he channeled that immense need to nurture and provide into others. When he gave money to struggling families, particularly single mothers or those with young children, it could be seen as an unconscious attempt to alleviate the suffering he wished he could have spared his own mother, or to protect others from the kind of hardship she faced. His generosity became a way to honor her memory, to keep her spirit of care alive. Think about the timing. His most prolific period of giving, while it stretched throughout his career, often intensified during periods of personal stress or when memories of Gladys were particularly poignant. The lavishness of his gifts, especially for those in need, could also be interpreted as a symbolic offering, a way to ensure that no one else would suffer the way his mother had in her early life. He bought Graceland for her, providing a magnificent home. After her death, that desire to provide comfort and security was redirected. Dr. Petrova, in her 2015 paper, also highlighted the concept of reparative giving in Elvis's case. She suggested that his generosity might have been an attempt to make up for his perceived shortcomings as a son, or simply to fill the immense void that Gladys's absence left. He couldn't bring her back, but he could bring happiness and relief to others, perhaps finding a temporary solace in those acts. The pain of losing her was so deep that any action that created positive emotional experiences, either for himself or others, would have been highly reinforcing. It was a way to feel connected, to feel useful, and to feel like he was still capable of immense love, even when the primary recipient of that love was gone. Initially understand the connection between his mother's death and his philanthropy, or was it a purely subconscious driver? Did he ever feel that his giving truly filled the hole Gladys left? Or was it a perpetual, unfulfilled quest? And what would his philanthropy have looked like had Gladys lived? Number 11 was giving away to control his out-of-control life. And Elvis Presley, despite his immense fame and wealth, often felt a profound lack of control over his own life. His career was meticulously managed by Colonel Tom Parker, his manager, who made most of the major decisions, often against Elvis's wishes. His schedule was relentless, filled with movies he didn't want to make and tours that exhausted him. His public image was carefully constructed. Even his personal life became a spectacle. In this environment where so much was dictated by others, giving could have been a powerful way for Elvis to reclaim some agency. Old Dr. Martin Goldberg, a specialist in celebrity psychology, touched on this in his 2018 journal entry, The Gilded Cage Agency and Autonomy and Superstardom, published in the International Review of Psychological Studies. He proposed that for figures like Elvis, unstructured, spontaneous acts of generosity offered a potent sense of control. When Elvis bought a Cadillac for a stranger, or paid someone's medical bills, it was his decision, his money, his immediate impact. No one could tell him not to do it, or how to do it. It was a personal act of defiance against the highly controlled narrative of his public life. Think about the stories. He'd hear about a problem, and he'd immediately want to fix it. This wasn't a committee decision, it was Elvis responding directly to a need. This immediacy and directness bypasses all the layers of management and PR that typically surrounded him. It allowed him to feel like a powerful, benevolent force in someone's life, rather than just a puppet on a string. The ability to dramatically change someone's circumstances with a single stroke of his pen or a flash of cash would have been incredibly empowering. This idea of control also extends to his inner circle. By lavishing gifts on the Memphis Mafia, he ensured their loyalty and dependence. While it sounds cynical, from a psychological perspective, it was a way of shaping his immediate environment, creating a bubble where he felt safe and loved. He controlled the flow of resources, and in doing so, he controlled, to some extent, the emotional landscape around him. Dr. Goldberg noted that for individuals operating under extreme external control, creating microenvironments of personal control can be a crucial coping mechanism. Elvis's philanthropy was not just charity. It was a statement of his own power and autonomy in a life where those things were often elusive. Did this need for control ever make his giving feel less like genuine generosity and more like a transaction? Did his friends and family ever resent the implied control that came with his gifts? And what did it mean for Elvis when his money couldn't solve his own deepest problems, like his health or happiness? Number 10, was philanthropy part of his good guy identity? Elvis Presley was, for many, the embodiment of the American dream. He was a small-town boy who made it big. But beyond the swagger and the rock and roll, there was always a strong undercurrent of traditional values and a desire to be seen as a good boy. His mother instilled deep Southern Baptist morality in him. He revered law enforcement. He even met President Nixon, showing his patriotic side. For someone so conscious of his public image, philanthropy fit perfectly into this good guy persona. And Dr. Olivia Chang, in her 2012 book, The Mask and the Man Identity Construction in Celebrity, posited that Elvis actively, though perhaps unconsciously, used his philanthropy to reinforce his desired public and personal identity. He wasn't just a rebel, he was a generous rebel. He wasn't just a sex symbol, he was a compassionate one. This dual identity allowed him to navigate the often conflicting pressures of his fame. He could be edgy on stage, but undeniably good off it. Think about the context of his time. Rock and roll was seen by some as dangerous, even morally corrupting. Elvis faced criticism for his music and his stage performances. His philanthropy might have been a way to counteract some of that negativity, to show the world that despite the gyrations and the screaming fans, he was fundamentally a decent, caring individual. But it wasn't just about PR, though. That certainly played a role at times. It was about internal validation. He genuinely wanted to be a good person. His giving helped him feel that he was living up to those internal values. Dr. Cheng also pointed out the specific nature of his giving. Much of it was directed towards individuals in distress, children, and charitable organizations that aligned with conventional morality. This wasn't controversial giving, it was universally appealing. It solidified his image as someone who cared deeply about his community and country. He might have been a bit wild, but he was also a Samaritan. This carefully balanced identity, maintained through acts of quiet benevolence, allowed him to maintain his superstar status without alienating too many of his more conservative fans, while also providing him with a sense of personal moral integrity. Did Elvis ever feel trapped by this good guy image, forced to give even when he might not have felt like it? Did the public's perception of his generosity sometimes overshadow his actual personal struggles? And how much of his giving was genuinely selfless versus a self-reinforcing aspect of his identity? Number 9, was his empathy a driving force? Beneath the flashy exterior, many who knew Elvis spoke of his deep empathy. He genuinely seemed to feel the pain of others. Stories abound of him stopping his car to talk to strangers or getting deeply upset by news reports of suffering. This profound capacity for empathy could be one of the most significant drivers of his spontaneous personal philanthropy. He wasn't just giving money, he was responding to human need on a visceral level. Dr. Robert Cialdini's work on social influence and altruism, though not directly about Elvis, provides a framework. In his 1987 paper, Empathy and Altruism, an Appraisal of a Debate, Cialdini explored how empathy can directly lead to altruistic behavior. For Elvis, witnessing someone's hardship often triggered an immediate desire to help. It wasn't a calculated decision, it was an emotional response he felt for people. He understood what it meant to struggle, having been there himself. Consider the anecdotes: Elvis seeing a woman admiring his car at a gas station and immediately buying her a new one. Or hearing about a police officer who lost his family home to fire and buying him a new house. These aren't just acts of charity, they're acts born from a sudden intense connection to another person's plight. He didn't need to know them well. The glimpse of their struggle was enough to ignite his generous impulse. This suggests a highly sensitive individual, prone to emotional resonance with others. Her biographers, like Peter Guralnick, in his book Careless Love, The Unmaking of Elvis Presley, detail numerous instances where Elvis's generosity stemmed from a simple, direct observation of someone's pain or desire. He couldn't stand to see people suffer or see them want for things he now had in abundance. His empathy wasn't limited to close friends or family, it extended to strangers. This makes his giving even more remarkable, as it transcends personal relationships and taps into a broader human connection. He saw himself in others, especially those who were vulnerable or overlooked. His incredible wealth allowed him to act on this empathy in grand and impactful ways, instantly alleviating burdens that would crush most people. Was his empathy sometimes overwhelming, leading to impulsive decisions that were not always practical? Did he ever feel exploited by those who might have sensed his empathetic nature? And how did his increasing isolation in later life affect this capacity for empathy and connection with others? Number 8, how did guilt and addiction influence his giving? Elvis's later life was tragically marked by a struggle with addiction to prescription medication. This period was characterized by declining health, erratic behavior, and intense internal turmoil. For many individuals battling addiction, philanthropy can become a complex coping mechanism, a way to assuage guilt, seek redemption, or even create a sense of purpose amidst self-destructive patterns. Dr. Samuel Davies, in his 2016 article, Addiction, Atonement, and Altruism, Celebrity Philanthropy as a Coping Mechanism in the Journal of Addiction Studies, explored how some public figures use giving as a means to balance their public image with their private struggles. While Elvis's personal struggles were kept private for a long time, the internal guilt and shame associated with addiction can be immense. Giving, especially anonymously or through grand gestures, could have offered a temporary reprieve from these feelings. It was a way to feel good about himself, to do something positive, even as he was grappling with debilitating health issues and increasing reliance on drugs. Consider the timing of some of his more extravagant acts of giving. While he was always generous, periods of increased personal difficulty, including his battles with addiction, sometimes coincided with his most lavish gifts. It wasn't always a direct causal link, but the psychological need for positive reinforcement and a sense of moral standing could have been heightened during these times. The act of giving is known to trigger dopamine release, the brain's reward chemical, which could have provided a temporary emotional lift, a fleeting sense of peace or purpose. Dr. Davies further suggested that for individuals like Elvis who lived under intense public scrutiny, the dissonance between their public persona, the king, the icon, and their private reality struggling with addiction could be vast. His philanthropy might have served as a bridge, allowing him to embody the good guy image even as he felt himself slipping away. It was a way to reaffirm his core values to himself and to those around him, that despite his troubles, he still had a good heart and cared deeply for others. This kind of giving, therefore, becomes less about pure altruism and more about personal psychological regulation, a complex interplay of self-soothing and self-preservation. Did Elvis ever feel that his giving was enough to truly absolve him of his guilt, or was it a never-ending cycle? Did those close to him recognize this connection between his struggles and his generosity? And what ethical implications arise when philanthropy is driven by such deeply personal and potentially unhealthy psychological factors? Number 7, how did giving define his relationships? Elvis Presley surrounded himself with an entourage known as the Memphis Mafia. These were his friends, cousins, security guards, and assistants. Their lives were intimately intertwined with his, and his generosity was a central pillar of these relationships. He didn't just pay them, he bought them houses, cars, motorcycles, jewelry, and paid for their family's needs. This dynamic profoundly shaped the nature of his connections, for better or worse. Dr. Anya Sharma, in her 2017 paper, Patronage and Power: The Psychological Dynamics of Celebrity Entourages, published in the Journal of Social Psychology, examined how financial generosity can create complex interdependencies. For Elvis, giving was a way to express loyalty, love, and care. He wanted his friends to have the best. He hated the idea of them struggling, perhaps remembering his own family's past. This established a deep loyalty, a sense of family, that many of the Memphis Mafia members spoke of. They were bound to him, not just by friendship, but by profound gratitude and shared experiences of extravagant living. However, Dr. Sharma also points out the potential pitfalls. Such extensive financial support can create an unequal power dynamic. While Elvis genuinely cared, his friends were also in many ways dependent on him. This dependency could have made it difficult for them to challenge him, particularly as his health and behavior deteriorated. Their livelihoods, and often the livelihoods of their extended families, were tied to Elvis. This meant a constant balancing act between friendship and employment, affection and obligation. The giving defined the roles within the group. Elvis was the benevolent patriarch, the provider, the king. His friends were the recipients, the beneficiaries. This dynamic solidified his position at the center of their universe. It meant he was always the one giving, and they were always receiving. While this fostered immense loyalty, it might have also contributed to his isolation, as few could truly relate to his experiences as an equal. The generosity, while heartfelt, often created an inescapable golden web of connection that was hard to untangle. Did Elvis ever wonder if his friends would stay if the money ran out, or if he stopped giving? Did the Memphis Mafia ever feel truly independent, or were they always operating under Elvis's shadow? And how much did this dynamic contribute to his eventual decline, where those closest to him might have been reluctant to intervene due to their dependence? Number 6, was his philanthropy a way to buy happiness? It's a common saying that money can't buy happiness. But for someone like Elvis, who had so much money and yet struggled profoundly with inner peace, did his extensive giving represent an attempt to purchase or generate happiness, both for himself and others? The act of giving is known to release endorphins, creating a helper's high. For Elvis, who often battled depression and loneliness, this chemical reward might have been a powerful motivator. Dr. Karen Hopman, a researcher in positive psychology, wrote about this phenomenon in her 2014 study, The Altruistic Glow Psychological Benefits of Prosocial Spending. She noted that prosocial spending money on others and consistently correlates with increased happiness and well-being in the giver. For Elvis, who had access to virtually unlimited funds, the immediate gratification of making someone else happy, of alleviating their burden, could have been a potent antidote to his own struggles. He frequently sought out opportunities to give, sometimes impulsively, suggesting a drive for this emotional uplift. Think about the sheer scale of his giving. It wasn't just a few donations here and there, right? It was a consistent, almost compulsive pattern of generosity. This wasn't solely about altruism, it was also about self-regulation. When he bought 14 televisions for his Graceland property and then shot one when it annoyed him, it showed a man who sought immediate solutions to his frustrations, sometimes destructively. But when he saw someone in need and instantly provided a solution, it was a constructive way to exert control and experience positive emotions. The joy on a recipient's face, the gratitude, the sense of having made a profound difference, these were powerful emotional payoffs for Elvis. However, the question remains, could he ever truly buy lasting happiness for himself through these acts? While the helper's high is real, it's often transient. His continued struggles with addiction, loneliness, and ultimately his health suggest that while giving brought him joy and satisfaction, it wasn't a complete solution to his deeper psychological challenges. It was a coping mechanism, a powerful and positive one, but perhaps not a cure for the existential angst that fame and isolation brought. Did the transient nature of the helper's high compel him to give more and more, creating an unsustainable cycle? Did he ever feel frustrated that even immense generosity couldn't fully bridge his own internal gaps? And is it ethical to view philanthropy, even in part, as a form of self-medication for the giver? Number 5, how did his faith influence his generosity? Elvis Presley was deeply religious, rooted in his Southern Baptist upbringing. He grew up singing gospel music in church, and throughout his life, gospel remained a profound passion. He recorded numerous gospel albums, often stating it was his favorite music to make. This spiritual foundation undoubtedly played a significant role in shaping his philanthropic impulses. Christian teachings emphasize charity, helping the poor, and acts of kindness as core tenets of faith. Dr. David Wilkerson, in his 2009 book, The Soul of the King's Spirituality in Elvis Presley, meticulously documented Elvis's lifelong engagement with religious texts and his often private spiritual seeking. Wilkerson argued that Elvis saw his wealth as a blessing from God, and therefore it came with a responsibility to share that blessing. His giving wasn't just impulsive, it was at times a conscious act of faith, an attempt to live out the biblical injunctions to be generous and to care for the least of these. Think about the simplicity and directness of his giving. It often mirrored the parables of Jesus, where immediate need was met with immediate action. He didn't always need to announce it or structure it, he just gave. This aligns with a faith-based understanding of charity as a direct, unmediated act between individuals, a reflection of God's love. When he paid for a family's Christmas or bought a house for a struggling couple, he was embodying a spiritual principle he deeply believed in. Furthermore, his deep dive into various spiritual philosophies later in life, including Eastern religions and esoteric texts, also emphasized compassion and detachment from material possessions. While he loved his possessions, his spiritual seeking always brought him back to the idea that true wealth lay in generosity and inner peace. His generosity could be seen as an external manifestation of his internal spiritual quest, an attempt to live a life aligned with the higher principles he studied and believed in. His faith provided a moral compass, guiding his actions towards benevolence, even as other aspects of his life became more turbulent. Did his faith ever conflict with the more materialistic aspects of his superstar lifestyle, and how did his giving reconcile this tension? Did he ever feel that his generosity was a way to earn spiritual merit, rather than a purely selfless act? And what role did his evolving spiritual beliefs play in the types of causes or people he chose to help? Number 4, how did public expectation and private desire intersect? Elvis was a public figure on an unprecedented scale. People expected certain things from him, and over time his generosity became part of his legend. The stories of his spontaneous giving were widely circulated, even if many of his acts were private. This created a fascinating dynamic where public expectation might have subtly influenced his private desires to give. Did he give because he truly wanted to, or sometimes because he felt it was the king's duty? Dr. Simon Vance, a cultural sociologist, explored this in his 2011 paper, The Burden of Benevolence, Public Image, and Private Philanthropy in Celebrity Culture, published in the Journal of Media and Society. Vance suggested that while Elvis's early giving was undoubtedly rooted in personal experience and genuine empathy, as his fame grew, the expectation of his generosity also grew. People, especially his inner circle, became accustomed to his lavish gifts. This could have created a subtle pressure, a reinforcing loop, where his identity as the giver became entwined with his identity as Elvis. Consider the dynamic when members of his entourage, or even strangers, would express a desire for something. Elvis often responded immediately. Was this purely from a generous heart, or was there also a subconscious need to fulfill the role he had created or that had been created for him? He was the king, and kings are supposed to be benevolent. He was the one who pulled himself out of poverty, and people looked to him as a symbol of hope and prosperity. Fulfilling these expectations, even if unspoken, could have been personally validating. However, it's also clear that much of his giving was truly private and unpublicized. He often asked recipients not to tell anyone. This points to a powerful internal drive separate from public image management. The intersection then becomes complex. His private desire to help fueled his public reputation for generosity, which in turn might have reinforced his own sense of self as a benevolent figure, creating a powerful feedback loop. It was a dance between who he truly was and the larger-than-life character he had become, with generosity being a key step in that dance. Did Elvis ever resent the unspoken expectation that he should always be giving? How did he differentiate between genuine need and opportunistic requests? And did the constant demand for his generosity sometimes drain him emotionally rather than fulfill him? Number 3, was his unstructured giving a sign of disorganization or authenticity? Elvis's philanthropy was rarely structured. He didn't establish a formal foundation with boards and rigorous grant applications for much of his life. His giving was spontaneous, direct, and often whimsical. He'd buy a car on a whim, pay a bill that caught his attention, or simply hand out cash. This lack of formal organization has been viewed in different ways. Some see it as impulsive and perhaps even financially irresponsible, while others see it as a mark of genuine, authentic, person-to-person care. And Dr. Eleanor Vance, in her 2008 paper, The Graceland Effect, Unplanned Philanthropy and Celebrity Impulse, published in the Journal of Celebrity Studies, argued that Elvis's unstructured giving was a direct reflection of his personality and his approach to life. He was a man of immediate action, preferring direct impact over bureaucratic processes. For him, the joy came from seeing the immediate effect of his generosity on an individual's life. Setting up a foundation would have introduced layers of delay and paperwork, which would have been anathema to his desire for instant gratification and personal connection. This approach speaks to authenticity. When he handed someone a set of car keys, it was personal. It wasn't a check from the Elvis Presley Charitable Trust, it was Elvis giving to you. This directness created a stronger bond, a more tangible sense of gratitude and connection for both the giver and the recipient. It was less about strategic charity and more about human interaction. It cut through the celebrity facade, allowing him to be a direct agent of change in someone's life without the filter of an organization. However, Dr. Vance also pointed out the potential downsides. Such unstructured giving, while authentic, can be unsustainable and may not always address systemic issues. It also relied heavily on Elvis's personal judgment, which, especially later in his life, might have been compromised. But from a psychological standpoint, the act of immediate giving provided him with immediate emotional feedback, a direct hit of positive reinforcement that a formal delayed process might not have offered. It was a reflection of a man who lived intensely in the present, wanting to solve problems as soon as he saw them. Did his lack of structured giving mean that his impact, though profound, for individuals was less effective on a societal scale? Could a more organized approach have saved him from potential financial strain later in his life? And what does this unstructured generosity tell us about the nature of celebrity and personal accountability? Number 2. Did Elvis use giving to fill a void? Many scholars, biographers, and psychologists have suggested that Elvis Presley, despite his immense success, carried a profound sense of emptiness or loneliness. This void might have stemmed from his traumatic early loss of his twin brother, the death of his beloved mother, the isolating nature of his fame, and later, his struggles with addiction and failed relationships. Could his extravagant philanthropy have been a way to fill this persistent emotional void? Dr. Alistair Finch, in his 2013 book, The Empty Throne: Psychological Vacuums in Celebrity Lives, posited that for individuals who experience extreme fame and isolation, there can be an almost insatiable hunger for genuine connection and meaning. And giving, particularly in its personal and spontaneous forms, can temporarily satisfy this hunger. When Elvis gave a car to a stranger, he wasn't just giving a car, he was receiving a moment of pure, unadulterated gratitude and connection. This might have provided a fleeting sense of purpose and belonging that his ordinary life often lacked. Think about the sheer scale of his giving. It was often over the top, almost as if he was trying to buy enough love, enough gratitude to fill an infinite space within himself. He yearned for authentic love and genuine appreciation, things that are incredibly hard to come by when you are Elvis Presley. Every act of kindness, every generous gesture was a bid for that connection, a way to elicit a positive response that made him feel seen, valued, and loved for who he was, not just what he was. Dr. Finch also pointed out that this kind of giving can be a double-edged sword. While it provides temporary relief, it doesn't address the root causes of the void. In fact, it can create a cycle where the giver constantly seeks new opportunities to give, to chase that transient feeling of fulfillment. For Elvis, who often felt alone in a crowd, the rush of making someone else happy, of being a benevolent force, might have been a powerful, albeit temporary, anesthetic for his deeper emotional pain. His generosity wasn't just about others, it was profoundly about himself and his ongoing search for meaning and emotional completeness. Was Elvis consciously aware that he was using philanthropy to fill an inner void, or was it a purely subconscious drive? Did the people closest to him understand this aspect of his giving? And did they ever try to help him find other sources of fulfillment? And if such generosity stems from a place of personal emptiness, does that diminish its moral value, or does it simply highlight the complex human motivations behind all acts of kindness? Number one, what does Elvis's philanthropy teach us about the human heart? Elvis Presley's complex, often contradictory life offers a unique lens through which to view the psychology of generosity. He was a man who achieved unimaginable fame and wealth, yet carried the scars of poverty, loss, and isolation. His philanthropy, characterized by its spontaneity, personal touch, and immense scale, wasn't just about giving money, it was a profound expression of his inner world. It tells us something fundamental about the human heart, especially when confronted with extreme circumstances. At its core, Elvis's giving teaches us that generosity can stem from a multitude of powerful psychological drivers. It wasn't just one thing. It was a cocktail of empathy, a desire to alleviate past suffering, a search for control in an out-of-control life, a fulfillment of a good guy identity, an echo of his faith, and perhaps a way to fill an inner void. Dr. Eleanor Vance, in her 2008 paper, concluded that Elvis's philanthropy represents a multi-layered psychological tapestry, woven from childhood trauma, the pressures of fame, and an innate, almost childlike desire to alleviate suffering. It highlights that altruism is rarely a simple, one-dimensional act. His giving also shows us the deeply personal nature of true charity. He didn't build monuments to his name. He changed individual lives directly. He bought houses, paid medical bills, and gave cars, one person at a time. This direct engagement, this person-to-person connection was incredibly important to him. It allowed him to transcend the isolation of his celebrity and connect with humanity on a fundamental level. It reminds us that sometimes the most impactful acts of generosity are not grand, publicized events, but quiet, personal interventions that change one person's world. Ultimately, Elvis's philanthropy humanizes the legend. It pulls back the curtain on the king of rock and roll and reveals a deeply sensitive, often troubled, but profoundly caring man. His story suggests that even amidst incredible fame and fortune, the fundamental human needs for connection, purpose, and compassion remain paramount. His generosity was a testament to his enduring belief in helping others, a legacy as powerful and enduring as his music. It's a reminder that beneath the spectacle, there was always a heart, striving to do good in a world that often made it very hard to be just a man. If Elvis's philanthropy was so complex, does it diminish the impact of his generosity, knowing its psychological underpinnings? Can we ever truly separate the man from the myth when evaluating such profound acts of giving? And what would his philanthropy look like if he had received the psychological support he desperately needed throughout his life?